Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Masechtas Megillah daf Beis. We're going to begin at the beginning of the Masechta. Megillah Nikrus B'Yad Alf Yud Beis Yud Gimel Yudal V'Tes Vav V'Pachos V'Yoser. So the Mishnah introduces that even though we typically read the Megillah on the 14th day of Adar, however, there are actually other times as well that it could be read on the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and the 15th. It can never be before the 11th. It can't be after that. Now, we'll discuss exactly why we don't just read on the 14th. That's what the Mishnah is going to talk about. Krachim, if you have these cities, which are Hamukafin Chayim Mimos Yeshu Nun, Karin B'Tes Vav. So if you have a walled city that has been walled since the time of Yeshu Nun, then they will read on the 15th, which we are familiar with Shushan Purim. Kfarim, these small villages, as well as Vayaros Gadolos Karan B'Yadalad, they'll read on the 14th, except El Shekvar Matim Liyam HaChnisa. We are lenient and we do the Kfarim a great favor, and because they, as Rashi says here, Kfarim Eina Bekiin Likros, they're not experts in reading, Isrichin, and they will need Shikren Lehem Echad Mimni Ear, someone will have to read for them. V'hitruchum Chachamim was Acher V'Lavo B'Yom Yudalad. They're not going to have to come twice. So Yom HaChnisa, the market days were Mondays and Thursdays. So on this Rashi, Palmim Yom HaChnisa Yud Gimel, Palmim Shehu Yud Aleph. Depending on the day, it could be all the way on the 11th. So even though normally Purim wouldn't be until the 14th, we'll still allow them to have the Megillah read to them on the Yom HaChnisa, which again is a tremendous kula and great sensitivity that we have for them. So Ketzad. So now we're going to go through basically every single day, which, except for maybe one or two exceptions, there's not much of a chiddush. Chaliyas Yadal B'Sheni. Let's say the 14th, which is Purim, falls out on a Monday. So Kfarim B'Yoros Gadolos Karim B'Yom. So everyone reads on that day because that is the Yom HaChnisa anyway. And as we said, those who are in walled cities, they read on the 15th, which would be the following day. Chaliyas B'Shlishi or Rabbi, if let's say the 14th fell out on a Tuesday or Wednesday, Kfarim Makdim Yom HaChnisa. So we always go backwards. We don't go forward, but rather it's Yom Makdimin, Yom HaChnisa. So therefore, if it was on a Tuesday, it's on Monday. It's a Wednesday, it's on a Monday, which means it could either be read on the 13th or the 12th. V'yoros Gadolos Karin Bo Bayom, and that's why it's interesting. Rashi, as I read, it says Upamim Shiyom HaChnisa Yom Yud Gimel, Upamim Shiyom Shehu Yud Aleph. The truth is that if the 14th is on a Wednesday, so then it's also Yud Beis. It's interesting why Rashi only says the 13th and the 11th. Ayin Sham. So anyway, so V'yoros Gadolos Karim B'Yom, so they will read on that day, the regular day, the 14th. Then they'll read on the 15th, the walled cities. Chaliyos B'Chamishi, which is the Thursday, so Kfar V'yoros Gadolos Karim B'Yom. So even those villages, they'll read on that day because it's Yom HaChnisa, as well as all the other big cities. That's when they always read. There's no leniency for them. And the walled cities, they'll read on Friday. Now this is where there's a chiddush here. Chaliyos Erev Shabbos. So let's say Purim falls on a Friday, which does happen. Kfarim Makdim Yom HaChnisa. So we know, again, Kfarim will read on the Thursday. Vayaros Gadolos and Mekavos Chayim Karin Boy B'Yom. So of course the Ayaros Gadolos, which is our minhag, we read on the 14th because that's the Friday. But the chiddush is, even though it's in a walled city, they will not read the Megillah on Shabbos on the 15th. Rather, they read it on the 14th. So that's an interesting. Whenever Purim falls out on a Friday, then everyone actually reads the Megillah together at the same time, at least the Ayaros Gadolos in those walled cities. So that's one chiddush. Furthermore, Chaliyos b'Shabbos, if let's say Purim falls out on Shabbos, in which it can't happen anymore. But let's say it did. So kfarim v'yoros gedolos matimin v'karin machnisa. So when it comes to kfarim, it's not a chiddush. We know that they would read on the Thursday, but the chiddush is the yoros gedolos. That we don't have them read on Shabbos. We wouldn't read the Megillah on Shabbos. We'll see why. And the Gemara is going to talk about that. But the chiddush is that the Yoros Gedolos, if they can't read on Shabbos, so maybe they should just read on the Friday. Why do we say they go from Shabbos the 14th to the 12th? Okay. Again, this is another time in which the reading would be on the 12th for these Kfarim. And of course, the walled cities, they would read on a Sunday. Chal Yois Achar Shabbos. Let's say Purim falls on a Sunday. So Kfar Matim Machnisa, which again, if the 14th is a Sunday, so that you have Saturday, Friday, and then Thursday. So you end up, that's where you get to the 11th. The large cities will read on that Sunday. And they'll read on a Monday. Now, Megillah Nikris B'Yadal Menolan. So, how do we know that the Megillah is read on the 11th? So, for Gemara Menolan, could be a little more come on. We're going to say later on. Chachamim Hekilu Akmarim Lios Makdim Liamachnisa. Kedei Shisaku Mayim Mamazon Lachim Shabakrachim. So they would go and they would provide food for the cities, and therefore, because of that, we're lenient for the Kfarim. Rashi says, what does it mean Kedei Shisaku? Shiu Penuyin, that they'll have time beyond Purim, on Purim itself, the Krachim, L'havsik Sarchi Sudas Purim, Livnei Hayaros, to be able to provide for the needs of the Sudas Purim for all the people in the cities. So Anan Hachikamrinan, Michti, Kulhu Anchikanesis Gedayla Takninu. Certainly, all these days, 11 through 15, it must not just be made up, but rather the Anshe Knesset Gedolah had to be the ones who established it. These are the Anshe Knesset Gedolah Yudal V'Tesvav Tikun Asur Rabban V'Akri Tekanta the Takinu Anshe Knesset Gedolah. So maybe it's interesting that they were oiker. It's interesting how that's being oiker. But want to tell me, yeah, it was the 14th and the 15th is Anshe Knesset Gedolah. Everyone else they instituted later on the other days. You can't just do that. But Tanan ain't based in Yochel Avata, Diver based in the Chavera, and can't go to Mimon of Chacham of Minyan. You have to be great of a Chacham of a Minyan in wisdom and number to be able to change things. And we're not going to be better than Anshe Knesset Gedolah by any stretch. So if that's the situation, it must be El Pshita Kul Anshe Knesset Gedolah Tekinu. It has to be that it was already pre-established that these were the days. But Heich Remiza, they must have had some hint in order to be able to make this takana. So we're going to see a couple answers. So Amr Rav Shimon Rav Rav Yochanan Rav Kadapasik says L'Kai Mesimi HaPurim Ela Bizmanehem, in their times. So Zmanim Harbe Tiknulhem. The fact that it says Bizmanehem, it means that they had there's a lot of them. There's a lot of different times, not just the 14th. We need it for the pasuk itself. Nimkein lemikra Zman. Zmanihem, Zmanim Tuva. Again, it's come to tell us that Chiddush. They're going to hear this concept a lot. That the fact that it's in their times, it means that the ones in walled cities do not read, at least except maybe on the exception of Purim of Yudals on a Friday, they do not read the same time as everyone else. So Imkein Lemikra Zmanam, Zmanihem, Shamam Menakulhu teaches us all these things. So Ema Zmanim Tuva, Zmanehem, so Ema Zmanim Tuva, Zmanehem Dimid Zmanam. Mazman Trey, Zmanim Trey. So maybe Zmanehem, so you could read the Megillah, I don't know, in the month of Nisan, or any time in the month of Adar. The fact that Zmanehem, it means that it has to be comparable to the 14th and the 15th as written in the Megillah. So therefore, that's how we have the 11th and the 12th. The problem is, we're forgetting another day, the 13th. How about the 12th and the 13th? Now, 13th doesn't have to be in the calculation at all. There's a very important Rashi up here. There's no Tosfos on this daf. Rashi says on the top, Hakoyel nikalu lihinokim oivehem. On the 13th, that was the date of the question of whether or not there will be mass genocide on Klal Yisrael. And therefore, we had to fight. Bein b'shushan, bein b'sharmin kaimus. Wherever we were, everyone was fighting on the 13th. K'moshe kasa b'sefer. Hilkach loitzach kra l'riboy. She roy l'kriya de ikar hanes bo haya. The ikar hanes was on the 13th, that we were victorious in our battle. That is why we celebrate Purim. Not because Haman died. That happened many months before. The actual celebration of Purim on the 14th is because of the military victory on the 13th. So therefore, the 13th was the Nes. So we don't need a reboy to davar pashut that you should be able to read the Megillah on the 13th. Fine. V'loseach riboy hachanami yud gimel zman kihil koil v'loseach riboy. Ve'im shitzer v'shivtzer. So maybe 16th and 17th. V'yaver ksiv. V'yaver means it cannot extend too far back, too much more. Fine. Rav Shmuel bar Nechmedi oimer kra kayomim. Not bizmanehem, but we went up from the drush kayomim. Kayomim asher nachul v'hem haYehudim yomim kayomim l'rabos yadav yud beis. It could have just said yomim, that these are days of rest. Was like these days. It must be that there's an extra two. Again, this is the question. Maybe it's the 12th and 13th, not the 11th and 12th. No, you don't need the 13th, because I'm Yud Gimel Zman Kihil Koil Hibel Sarach Riboy. Be'em Ashitzer V'Shivtzer 16 and 17. No, Yavar Ksiv. Rav Shimon bar Nachmana might tell Mibzman. Why does he learn out from? So there's two answers how we know the 11th and 12th as a remez, either from Zmanehem or because it's Kayomim. So why is he learn out from Zmanehem? Because Zmanehem will mashmalei. You can't learn out all these drushes from that same word. You can't make such a diuk. Rav Shimon bar Abba my time alomer kiyomim. This is coming to talk about the future generations. What does that mean? Rashi says, Kloimer yasul adairis. It just means the 14th and 15th is not just for like that one time, it's for all future generations. Kayomim, just like now, so in the future. But it's not coming to add other days. Amar Rabba, Rabbi Yochanan, Zu Divrei Rabbi Kiva, Stimata. Did Darish Zmanam Zmanehem. That's according to his Shita. Chacham Amrim Ein Karin Oisa El Bazmana. According to Chachamim, they say no, they can only read it in its time. There's no of these extra days. So Meisvei, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Masai, when do we say this whole statement? Says Rashi, Hekil Chachamim Al Kfarim. When are we lenient on these small villages? Only Mizman Shashanim Ketiknon, and the time when Yisrael is making the Shanim properly, says Rashi. That's referring to Shashanim Misabros El Pi Beistin. That they actually, the Beistin is the ones that are involved in the calculations of the month. Yisrael Shuriyan El Masan, and we're in Eretz Yisrael. However, nowadays, no. And this is, Rashi says a very important question, which is question 1, as well as TB21. The question is, what's the whole problem? What's the whole issue? So Rashi says, why is it totally on Beistin's knowledge of what these things are, when the month is? Shepasku kol eila v'Yisrael nifredu. So all of Klal Yisrael spread out. V'yigiu shluchei Beistin etzlam. And since Beistin cannot get their messengers to them on time, hakol seifel nemikra Megillah. Everyone's waiting for when the Megillah is being read. V'armim yom yodalad ba'ader karinim b'Megillah, because everyone knows the 14th is the day that we read. Nisharu l'ader tesvav yom v'tesvav shel Nisan. You have 15 days of Adar, then you have 50 more days left, 50 more days of Nisan, then Ois and Pesach. It must be, so that's how they calculate when Pesach is, based on when the Megillah reading was. V'im taktim kriyasa. And once you start making it on the 11th, Yasu Pesach Asor Shashim Yom, Shel Kriya. They'll end up doing the reading, says Rashi, 30 days afterwards. V'nim so oichel chametz bayomim Shel Pesach. They'll end up eating chametz on Pesach because they'll think that they're actually celebrating Pesach at the right time. Everything will be done in the improper time. Of course, they're also going to be having their Seder on the first night of Pesach. It's not even Pesach. So there's a lot of problems. So because of that issue, we don't do this anymore. Rabbi Yehuda Libdaman. So when Yehuda says this statement of a Mosai, what's he talking? Who's he going like? According to Rabbi Kiva, he does not make any distinctions. He apparently holds that this applies even nowadays. It was even according to the Rabbanan, they actually did originally have this takana of these days. It was only later on that it was removed. Therefore, it's a tiyuf from Rabbi Yochanan that says that this whole concept is not like the Chachamim. Some say a little differently. When a Bryce is similar to this, that's the only time the Kfarim could read earlier. Everyone's staring at when the Megillah is going to be read in Karnos El Bismana. We only will read the Megillah in its normal time. Rav Ashi Kashle Rabbi Yehuda. So he's going to end up asking a stira of the Rabbi Yehudas as we continue to Beis and Beis. Then they'll end up saying that it's a different person. Is it true that Rabbi Yehuda really makes this distinction that we only read the Megillah at its time? When do we do this? Only during the times when the Kfarim would come in on Mondays and Thursdays. If they don't come in on Mondays and Thursdays, in Karna Oisa El Bizmana, then they will read it at the right time. So Makam Shenichnasim Yamasheni Mia Karina Hills Manazat. The distinction isn't now or then, it's all totally if the Kfarim actually went in or not. So even Bizmana said they would still have this takana for the Kfarim. Umaykel Mulabrais Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. The Kasha Rabbi Yehuda, Michael Mulabrais Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. It's hard to understand. So you have a stira. So the answer isn't, it must be another person. Why would you assume that's another person? The answer is because he did hear one statement in the Rabbi Yehuda and one like the statement of Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. When the Kasha later Rabbi Yehuda, once he heard, it's a stira. No, he said, Man de Tanila Rabbi Yehuda lav davka. It was really not Rabbi Yehuda when he said that. It was Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. Man de Tanila Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda davka. So that when they made these statements and they weren't careful to saying the entire name, so therefore people actually thought it was a stira Rabbi Yehuda. No, Rabbi Yehuda said his din. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda said his din. They don't say the same thing, right? One of them is talking about it's totally on Bisman Hazeh or not Bisman Hazeh. The other one says it's totally off where the Kfarim go in. Okay. Weiter. So again, if it's a walled city from the time of Yeshua, that's when they read on the 15th. So so how do we know that's a din? So Amar Rava di Amar Kra. The pasuk is Alkena Yudam Prazim Yoshin Bori Prazos and Gaimer. So these prazim that are sitting in these open cities, so they read on the 14th. Now mid prazim ba'arba asar mechamisha asar. It's a diak. If the prazim read on the 14th, so it must be those who are in a walled city read on the 15th. So maybe it just means the 14th read, the 15th people. If you're in a walled city, people in a walled city don't have to read at all. My answer is a beautiful answer. V'lav Yisrael ninhu. What do you mean? They're Jews. They still should be reading the Megillah. Because you're in a walled city, okay, you don't have to read the Megillah. What do you mean? They're still Jews. That's not even a svara. Which means because it was something that was affecting of all people, then certainly they should also be reading. Maybe it just means if you're in a regular city, you read on the 14th. However, Mukafin are based on they could read on the 14th. In the question says and the 15th or the 15th. Now, then I would say that you have a good point. Yom Chamisha Asar, Asa Eis Upsik and Posik, and it breaks it up. Hani Barba Asar v'Hani B'Chamisha Asar. They can't say they can pick and choose, or maybe do both. No, it means that they do this, and the ace, the fact, again, it didn't just say and, it said the ace. So the S is a hefsek, it interrupts it, to show that there's two separate people doing different things. So again, that point is maybe they have to do both, the 14th and the 15th. Now the Gemara says, if they want, they can do the 14th or the 15th. The first question was maybe they have to do 14th and the 15th. No, it says v'ace. V'ace, it says they only have to do one or the other. They have to do the 15th. The question is maybe they have to do either one. They can choose. They can't do the 14th because it has to be a different day than them. Okay, so why does it have to be the 15th? So have them do it on the 13th. And our answer is Kishushan. What is that? So this is a very important Rashi, because how is that an answer? Rashi says, Kivan delo ramos loch hakosev zman hu mukafin amos. Since it doesn't mention anything in the Pesukim clearly when the walled cities read, V'ashchan Shushan shasu b'tesvav, and we know that Shushan did it on the 15th, because after all they were fighting on the 13th and the 14th. So therefore, mistaber she'oisa hayoim shil mukafin. It must be that it's the 15th day for the mukafin. So Ashkan Asiyah, Zachir Manolan. So I understand Asiyah, says Rashi, Mishnah b'yomtiv, Shedehe leprozim b'yodalid, umukafin b'tesvav. How do we know the reading of the Megillah is also supposed to be on the 15th? So Amakra b'hayomim ho'il niskar menasim. So Isker Zachir l'Asiyah. Just like we do the Asiyah, we do the Zachir at the same time, which the Zachira is the reading of the Megillah. Fine. Masnisin lo ki'aitana. So it must not be like the following time. The San Rabbi Shua ben Karcha Oimer Krachem hamukafin l'chaimim mimos Achashverosh Karin b'chamish aser. So not the times of Yeshua ben Nun, the times of Achashverosh. So the question is, my time Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. So Kishushan Ma Shushan mukefes chaimim mimos Achashverosh Karin b'chamish aser Av kol shemukefes chaimim mimos Achashverosh Karin b'chamish aser. Which it sounds like a pretty logical answer that you would think that makes sense. Just like in Shushan was built in the time of Achashverosh, so too we're going to say any walled cities from the time of Achashverosh, not all the way back to Yeshua. So it's not like our Mishnah, but Tani did done my time. Why would our Tana say all the way back from Yeshua Nun? Where says Yel Prazi Prazi? He has a Gzer Shavak. Siv Hacha Al Kain HaYehudim HaPrazim, those cities which are not walled. Uksiv Hasam Lavan Mi'ari HaPrazi Harbim Oid. Malhol Mukefes Chaimim Mos Yeshua Ben Nun. Avkan Mukefes Chaimim Mos Yeshua Ben Nun. So it's actually, this Gzer Shav you can see is quoting Psukim from Sefer Devarim, which obviously is in the time of Yeshua Ben Nun. Prazi Rashi says Lo Gomer Gzer Shava. Fine. Okay. Fighter. Now Bishlam Yeshua ben Karcha Lomer Katana Didan. Delasely Prazi. He doesn't hold a Prazi. El Atandi Didan my Tamul Emer Yeshua ben Karcha. My Taima the Ha'isle Prazi. He has Xer Shava. That's why it doesn't hold like him. So this Rashi says, Lo Gomer Gzer Shava Merabe. He didn't learn this Gzer Shava from his teacher. Vein Adam Dun Gzer Shava Atzmai El Imkin Kibla Mirabo. A very important Rashi of the Yud Gimel Midos Machlokes Rashi and Taisus, I think in Masechta Sukkah, that talks about what are the din? Can you just come up with something by yourself? A Kal V'Chomer would hold a svara by yourself. Beferish, this Rashi holds, and everyone holds, that when it comes to Gzer Shava, unlike a Kal V'Chomer, Gzer Shava has to come from tradition, from many generations. You can't make up a Gzer Shava randomly. It doesn't work like that. The other Yud Aleph Midos, the other 11 is questionable. So Hachi, coming back anymore. El Shushan the Avdi Kaman. What are the people in Shushan doing? Look at Prozim, because they were in the 14th. V'loi Kumu Kafin. And not like the walled cities. Why? Because it wasn't built in the days of Yeshua. So how could it in Shushan be on the 15th, right? You should say, I'm sorry, Shushan, you can't read on the 15th. What do you mean? We're a walled city. Yeah, but it wasn't built in the days of Yeshua ben Nun. So Marava V'Yarmla Kedi Shani Shushan Hoyabanasba Nes. You can't start asking questions about why we read on the 15th in Shushan. That's where the miracle happened. That's exactly the whole miracles in Shushan. Now Bishlam Matandi done the Hainu Dechsib. Medina, ear, Medina. Why does it mention different countries, provinces? To make the distinction between those types of cities. Shushan is different than the other cities. That even though it was a walled city later on, still it's not like a regular city. El Rabbi Shubin Karcha Bishlam Medina Shushan Lashar Yarais El Ir Lo Mayasa. So what do you do with that? Why does it mention those words? Come on. Well, Tadi Didan Minicha, it's better for you. Gibandi Isli Prazi. Since you already have Gzer Shavas and Medina Lumli, you don't need that either. You already learned that out from that Gzer Shava. El Krol Drasha Dasa. It's coming to tell you to Rasha. Rabbi Shubin Levi Hudasa. Yomi Shubin Levi. Krach. When we're talking about a city, a walled city, it's for Kol Hasamachloi. Anything which is near it. Hanira imai nidain krach. Even if they're not in the walled city, but if you're able to see the walled city, then you could read on the 15th. It says Rashi Karim Betesvav Samuch Afal Gav She'enu Nira Afal Pi She'enu Samuch. As the word is going to explain how is that possible. You're near it, but you can't see it. You can see it, but you're not near it. So the word is going to talk about that. But the Gemara now just qualifies this a little bit more and says ad kama. So how far away? From these two cities, which happens to be like a mill. So just say mill, blame a mill. Hakamash Milan Dishira de Mill Kamahavi Michamosan de Latveria. If you know the distance between those two places, then you'll be able to know the answer to that. Okay. Here we're going to stop there. Let's see a couple of questions. Question 2. L'inyan ma hukshu zechiru v'asiya b'pasik v'hayomim o'el niskar menasim. So, in what way do we make a hekesh of zechir and asiya based on this pasuk? So, on this, the answer is, as we said, that the 2 days of prazim and the mukafin, l'kriyas Megillah, are just like the Mishnah and Yom Tov. So just like on the 14th, there's the 14th and the 15th day. So and that's how we learned out the Asiya. So too from this pasuk, there's also this idea of the that you have to read the Megillah on those different days. Skipping to question 4, we're going to see this again tomorrow. Nimsa Mialeha Bahar Imase Karnes Megillah Be'ir. So it's going to end up saying if you're in a valley, you're in a mountain, so you could see the walled city, or you're close to it. So it's totally on, as we said over here, a mill. So it says Kol Chismucha Dahainu Shin Rachak Mill. If it's not more than a mill away, then you read on the 15th. If you're further away than a mill, then you'll end up reading on the 14th. TA 20. Bama Taloi Hasheila. What is this machlokas talion? Im b'shushin karim b'tesvav hu medin mukafin o metam acher. Mahu tam ha'acher. So the question is, do we require that it needs to be mukaf chayma from the days of Yeshua ben Nun or the days of Achashverosh? And the other reason is mishum denasaba nes, because a miracle actually happened in Shushan, and therefore for that reason, even though it's true it was only built in the days of Achashverosh, nonetheless they'll read on the 15th. Ad kan.